Kyle was spoon-feeding his dying dog beneath an old oak tree when the seizure hit. Violent, sudden, like the earth cracked open. Murphy convulsed, foam pouring from his mouth, eyes wide in terror. Kyle screamed, cradling him, begging the universe to stop. But what happened next will shatter even the strongest hearts. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The air on the tarmac was thick with jet fuel and late summer heat, the kind that clung to your skin and refused to let go. As Staff Sergeant Kyle Bennett descended the metal stairs of the transport aircraft, the weight of 3 tours, 14 years, and 100 sleepless nights hung on his shoulders like a second rucksack. There were no bands, no signs, no reporters, just a handful of families clutching handmade welcome posters, waving nervously, hoping their soldier still resembled the person they remembered. Kyle scanned the crowd out of habit, prepared to settle into the quiet obscurity he'd grown used to. Then he saw him. At first, Kyle thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. A golden retriever, muzzle white as frost, fur thinned by age, stood trembling beside a folding lawn chair where Kyle's mother sat. The dog was squinting, his head tilted slightly as if trying to confirm the impossible. His tail moved in slow, uncertain wags. Murphy. Kyle's legs faltered mid-step. It was like his body had been struck by something invisible, a swell of grief and joy so fierce it nearly knocked the air from his lungs. He dropped his duffel bag, unaware it had hit the ground, and started walking faster. Then running. Murphy didn't bark. He couldn't anymore. But his body remembered. His front paws skittered forward on the concrete, while his hind legs lagged behind, stiff and buckling. The crowd parted without being asked, sensing something sacred was unfolding. Kyle collapsed to his knees just as Murphy reached him. He wrapped both arms around the old dog's frame, feeling bones beneath fur that once had muscle, and sobbed into the tangle of gold and gray. Murphy pressed his head against Kyle's chest and stayed there, unmoving, his breath raspy but steady. "You waited for me," Kyle choked out. Not to anyone in particular, just to Murphy, maybe to God. His mother stood behind them, one hand over her mouth. She hadn't told Kyle she was bringing Murphy. She wasn't sure the dog would make it this far. She'd carried him halfway from the car and let him walk the rest when he insisted. A young girl nearby whispered to her father, "Why's the soldier crying?" "Because that's his best friend," the man said quietly, "and his best friend didn't forget him." The heat, the noise, the world itself seemed to fade away. There was just a man and his dog, bound by a thread stretched thinner than time, refusing to break. The house was quieter than Kyle remembered, not in the way a place falls silent, but in the way it holds its breath, deliberately, reverently, as if the walls themselves knew this was not a return, but a vigil. He carried Murphy inside like a relic, one hand under the dog's chest, the other cradling his hind legs. Murphy's body was frail, feather light, a whisper of the golden blur that had once torn through backyards, chasing squirrels and summer laughter. Kyle placed him gently on the couch, the one Murphy used to be banned from, but had long since claimed as his throne. He laid a blanket over the worn cushions and sat beside him, one hand resting on Murphy's thinning fur. The clock ticked. Dust swirled in sunbeams. Kyle didn't move. He canceled every plan, shut off his phone. The world outside would have to wait. Each morning, Kyle rose with the sun and carried Murphy outside like a soldier bearing a fallen comrade. They sat beneath the maple tree where fetch used to happen. Kyle would still toss the ball, not far, just a few feet. Murphy's head would follow the arc. His tail, slow and deliberate, would thump once against the grass. That was enough. Kyle spoon-fed him boiled chicken and sweet potatoes, blended to a paste. He spoke softly while he fed him, narrating memories, as if the sound of those days could summon them back. "Remember that lake in Idaho? You jumped in before I even parked the truck. God, you smelled for a week." Murphy would blink slowly, his gaze fixed on Kyle's voice, more than his face. At night, Kyle curled on the floor beside him, arm draped over the dog's ribs to feel the rise and fall. It reminded him of patrol nights, when sleep came in broken shifts and everything that mattered lay within arm's reach. His mother stood in the doorway sometimes, watching. Her concern was quiet, but constant. "You need to start your life again," she said gently. "You're home now." Kyle didn't look up. He waited. 10 years, every single day. "I'm not rushing through this." And for a moment, there was hope. Murphy ate. He wagged his tail. He even barked, just once, hoarse and thin, but it lit something in Kyle's chest like a flare in the dark. But then, just after midnight, the seizure hit. Murphy's body stiffened, then snapped into motion, violent, spasmodic. Foam flecked his lips. His legs kicked as if running from something invisible and cruel. Kyle, startled from sleep, dropped beside him and cradled his head. Murph, no, stay with me." His voice cracked into a scream, panicked, primal. Blood drained from his face as he scooped Murphy into his arms, his own limbs trembling with adrenaline and dread. The drive to the vet blurred. Streetlights streaked past like searchlights in a war zone, and Kyle whispered over and over, as if repetition could rewrite reality. "Please, not yet." The sterile brightness of the exam room did nothing to dull the dread pooling in Kyle's stomach. The hum of the fluorescent lights sounded like a countdown. He sat hunched in the corner, Murphy bundled in a soft towel across his lap, the dog's breath shallow and ragged. His fur was damp with Kyle's tears. The vet entered quietly, like someone stepping into a sacred space. She didn't speak at first. She just looked, at Murphy, then at Kyle, with the kind of eyes that had seen too many endings and still never grew numb to them. "It's time, Kyle," she said finally, voice low, deliberate. "His organs are failing. He's in pain, even if he's trying to hide it for you. He only held on this long, for one reason." Kyle's throat clenched. "I should have come home sooner," he choked out, words like gravel. "I should have found a way. He waited so long." "No." The vet stepped closer, kneeling so they were eye level. "Don't turn his gift into guilt. He waited because you were worth the wait. He waited so he could see you again, so he could let go, knowing you were safe." Kyle nodded, barely, tears streaming down his face as he cradled Murphy closer. He could feel every rib beneath the golden fur, every heartbeat growing fainter. The sedative came first, swift, silent. Murphy's body softened, tension unwinding like a clock winding down. His breathing slowed. Kyle leaned in, lips brushing Murphy's ear, whispering stories that spanned years and lifetimes. He talked about the first snowfall they ever saw together, about the day Murphy dove headfirst into a pile of raked leaves and emerged covered in joy, about the countless nights he'd fallen asleep with Murphy's chin on his boots back home. Each word was a thread, tying their lives into one last tapestry. The final injection was prepared. The vet paused, waiting for Kyle's nod. Then, just before the needle touched skin, Murphy stirred. His head lifted, weak but determined. His blind eye found Kyle's face, and somehow, with the last ounce of strength in his fragile frame, Murphy leaned in and licked Kyle's cheek. A kiss. Not instinct, not reflex. A choice. Kyle broke. The kind of breaking that's quiet and absolute. His arms tightened around Murphy as the drug flowed in. One breath, then another, then stillness. The silence was unbearable. Then rage. Kyle stood abruptly, fists clenched, and slammed one hand onto the cold metal table. The clang echoed like a shot. "He waited for me! He waited!" The words ripped out of him, grief braided with fury. Years stolen by war, moments denied by duty, all the birthdays missed, the winters apart, the walks they'd never take again. "He deserved more," Kyle growled, breath shaking. "We both did." But in his lap, though the weight had changed, Murphy was still there, still warm, still wrapped in every memory, every bond words could never fully explain. And slowly Kyle sat back down, rested his forehead against the soft golden fur, and wept. Not just for the end, but for the love that waited through it. The house had fallen into a hush that no longer felt sacred, just hollow. Morning light streamed through the blinds, painting pale bars across Kyle's unmade bed. But he didn't stir. The world moved on outside his window, but time inside the room was frozen at the hour Murphy died. The bowl still sat by the back door, untouched. A tangle of fur clung to the couch cushion like a ghost refusing to leave. Every footstep was an echo of what used to be. Kyle lay curled toward the wall, unshaven, sleepless, spirit splintered. He hadn't opened a single message, hadn't answered a single call. His uniform hung untouched in the closet, and his boots, once a symbol of purpose, sat beside his bed like artifacts of a life he no longer recognized. Then came a knock, not sharp or urgent, just steady. "Kyle," his mother's voice called gently, "I found something." She pushed open the door and stepped in, her presence soft but firm. In her hand, an envelope, creased, yellowed, the ink faded slightly from time. She laid it on the nightstand and left without another word. Kyle stared at it for a long time before reaching. His fingers shook. The handwriting was unmistakable. "For Kyle, when I'm gone." It wasn't Murphy's name on the paper. It was his father's. He sat up, heart lurching in his chest like it had been kicked. His father had died 6 years ago. They'd barely spoken in his final months. Too many things unsaid, too many scars between wars and generations. But now, here he was, speaking across time. Kyle opened the envelope. Inside, a folded sheet, lined and yellowing but still intact. His father's words spilled out like they'd been waiting. "Son, if you're reading this, then you've lost someone. And if it's the dog I think it is, then I know exactly what's ripping through your chest right now. I lost Rex in '87, old shepherd mutt, never left my side. When he died, I cried harder than I did at any funeral I ever attended. And I'm telling you now, there's no shame in that. You and me, we saw things most men wouldn't survive, but it's these damn dogs that break us clean in two. Why? Because they never asked us to be perfect, just to come home. They don't count time like humans. They don't care about calendars. They count love. That's their clock. Every moment you gave him, every walk, every belly rub, every time you whispered his name, he filed that under eternity. So don't you dare feel guilt. You gave him everything. And he knew it." Kyle's tears blurred the final lines. He gripped the letter like a lifeline. For the first time since the burial, he pulled on a sweatshirt and stepped outside. The backyard smelled of soil and spring. The old oak tree towered above the fresh mound where Murphy lay. A handmade wooden marker sat at its base, simple, unadorned. Kyle dropped to his knees and placed the letter on his lap. He pressed his hand to the earth. "You didn't wait too long, Murph. You waited just enough." A breeze picked up, rustling the leaves overhead. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't carry voices, but it felt like something. Acknowledgement, maybe. A quiet yes. Kyle closed his eyes. The pain remained, sharp and deep. But underneath it, for the first time, was peace. Disaster had taken Murphy. War had taken years, but not the love, never the love. That was carved into his bones now, etched like a story no storm could erase.